Shabbat Shalom everyone, and welcome to Messianic Fellowship Online. Our study today follows the Torah portion Vayeshev, He Dwells. Welcome Natan, and thanks for joining us again.
Oh, I'm very happy to be here. It's always wonderful to talk about Torah. And despite the opening verse, which talks about Jacob, we move quickly to the story of Joseph. And Joseph, of course, is the youngest son, yet he is especially favoured by his father Jacob, which, as one might expect, does not bode well for Joseph, and his brothers do end up hating him. And they would go, "Who does he think he is, dreaming that he is better than us?" And his brothers would complain. So on one fateful day, Joseph was sent to find his brothers, who take him hostage and sell him to travelling slave traders on their way to Egypt.
That's a really tragic example of what can happen when siblings fight or hate each other.
Absolutely. And yeah.
And the question of the week in our study today is about sibling rivalry.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I think people will find that'll trigger some lively discussion. So back to the story of Joseph's plight in Egypt. But wait a minute, his plight is interrupted by the unusual story of Judah, who goes off and marries a Canaanite woman called Shua, which he should not have done, of course, as she was not a Hebrew. Anyhow, they have 3 sons together. The oldest son is named and he marries a young Canaanite woman called Tamar. Was unrighteous, and so God caused him to die. As a result, Tamar was now childless and had no one to carry on the name of her husband. The custom at the time was that the brother and her dead husband was duty-bound to marry her and carry on her previous husband's name. But unfortunately, he also dies, and Tamar still doesn't have a child. What will happen next? But thankfully, Judah still has 1 son left. However, Judah refuses to let Shelah, his youngest son, marry Tamar, for fear that he might also die. Are you superstitious? No? Okay, he probably was a little there. So time passes and Tamar devises a plan to carry on her dead husband's name by tricking Judah into sleeping with her so she might fall pregnant. But the plot thickens. But I don't want to go ahead on the story or spoil the story by telling everyone how she does this. But what I do want to mention are the similarities between Tamar and Ruth from the book of Ruth, in the beautiful and touching story of how this non-Israelite woman becomes a grandmother of King David. And Tamar also has a child by an Israelite, and also in the line of King David. And so both of them have sons. The sons die, they're childless, and it's just through God's hand in it, or circumstances. In Tamar's case, I mean, she sort of pushed the boundaries a bit, but nonetheless, did not Judah call her righteous?
Certainly. Further in our readings today, the prophet Amos prophesies against the people of Israel for their disobedience and disloyalty towards God. Through Amos, God tells the Israelites that they alone are his chosen people amongst all the nations of the world, and they must not intermarry with the pagan nations around them. God will bring judgment upon them. And here in 1 Peter 4 verse 17, "For the time has come for the judgment to begin. It begins with the household of God, and if it starts with us, what will the outcome be for those who are disobeying God's good news?"
So Chevy, the festival of Hanukkah is upon us, and I know that your daughters enjoy cooking. So what are they thinking about?
Latkes, the potato pancakes, and donuts, jam-filled ones especially. Lots of oily things.
Ooh.
Just not very good today, but
yummy, yummy.
they do taste good.
Indeed.
Even though Hanukkah is not mentioned in the Torah, it has been added to Jewish culture from the time of the Maccabees, when they restored the temple back to its glory some 200 years before Messiah came. The special time known as the Festival of Lights and the Feast of Dedication, which celebrates the triumph of the Jewish people over their Assyrian oppressors. And Yeshua himself went up to Jerusalem for this festival.
Indeed.
Remember to watch the short inspirational video at the end of this study. Our program would not be the same if it didn't include some inspiring worship songs and prayers. They thank God for his amazing contribution in the lives of the patriarchs, judges, kings, prophets, and all disciples. They continue through his word to turn people away from their sin and repent, so that they would be blessed beyond measure in this life and the next. This is why we always begin with the song Shabbat Shalom by Jonathan Sertal, which is also sung by a great number of God's people worldwide. So enjoy today's program.
Michelle,